I finally got around to watching Dave Chappelle's latest Netflix special, The Closer. And I had heard of it because, and you may have heard of this controversy surrounding transphobic jokes, or at the very best, jokes that are insensitive to trans people. So I wanted to check it out. First of all, it's Dave Chappelle. Second of all, primary sources are your friend in this era. And I gotta say, first of all, I thought Sticks and Stones was way better than The Closer. Um, I definitely laughed a lot more during Sticks and Stones. I wouldn't say that The Closer is bad. I mean, it's Dave Chappelle. How bad can it be, right? But I didn't think that it was as good. And the funny thing is, in Sticks and Stones, a lot of the same issues that got him into trouble this time around also happened. He had this whole segment on the LGBTQ community, which in this special, he focused more on trans people. But that was one segment in a special that was roughly an hour long. I think he spent about 15 to 20 minutes roughly talking about trans stuff. And I gotta say, the question of whether or not Dave Chappelle is transphobic, I can't read his mind. No one can. I would think that the answer to that is no, that he's not transphobic. I think the core of it is he's not educated enough on trans issues to talk about this shit responsibly in public, which is what gets him into trouble. Now, that might be his intention. And if so, hey, mission accomplished, buddy. However, there were some things that he said that are wrong. And if someone is sensitive to this stuff, I could totally see how they would say that he's like causing harm or whatever. So before I get into that, I'm gonna talk in general terms and then drill down into the more specific stuff. Okay, something that you have to be mindful of, or at least it's helpful to be mindful of this. A joke could have a certain topic, but not necessarily. How can I say this? Let's take physically handicapped people, okay? Someone in a wheelchair. You can have a joke on the topic of physically handicapped people, but the butt of that joke isn't necessarily the handicapped people. That is something that is very important to keep in mind. Just because a joke has a handicapped person in it, sometimes the butt of the joke is the comedian. I remember, oh boy. Just as an example, the first time I saw Andrew Schultz perform at the Just for Laughs festival in Montreal, I had never heard of him before. At some point, he went into Michael Jackson's rape allegations. He's not here to defend himself, okay? I'm not gonna play defense for him. I'm calling them allegations just as habit because, due process is important. But he's dead. I don't give a fuck. And I'm sorry to his victims and all that shit. But the point is, Andrew Schultz was talking about the rape victims, and he got me to laugh at the victims, but really the butt of the joke was himself. So the premise of the joke was that how can I say this? If I met my childhood idol, I would be really happy to have sex with them, essentially. So on the surface, that joke is laughing at the victims, but really the butt of the joke is the comedian saying that joke. And I'm not saying that Dave Chappelle did this in his special. I'm just using this as an example of how the topic of a joke and the butt of the joke is not the same thing. Not necessarily anyway, because sometimes I will make a joke about, oh, not me, but sometimes someone, a comedian will make a joke about a handicapped person, and the joke is that they're handicapped. I don't think that's cool. However, it leads into another a topic that comes up a lot in these conversations, which is the concept of punching up versus punching down. It is with heavy heart that I inform you that a joke can punch down and still be funny. Those are two independent things. So to add another flavor of nuance to what the example that I just gave, let's choose me as a hypothetical. So I can make a joke about a handicapped person, and the joke is that they're handicapped, and the joke could be funny. Now, would I be punching down in such a joke? Absolutely. Is it cool that I said that joke? No, probably not. However, as long as you're not so emotionally invested in the plight of handicapped people that you cannot separate the fact that I'm punching down from what the actual joke is, it is possible to laugh at that. I don't know how clear I'm being, but hopefully by the time this segment ends, you'll have a better idea of where I'm coming from. So in comedy, there is a term called hack, and I use this term a lot. I wish more people understood it. Let me just read the Wikipedia on it, the beginning of it. Hack is a term used primarily in stand-up comedy, but also sketch comedy, improv, blah, 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 to refer to a joke or premise for a joke that is considered obvious, has been frequently used by comedians in the past, and or is blatantly copied from its original author. So hack can mean multiple things. And what I was alluding to in my handicap joke example is that if the punchline is, haha, you're in a wheelchair, that would be hack. And hack isn't funny. Okay. So in this theoretical metaphor where I'm making fun of a handicapped person about them being handicapped, that's the joke. And that it somehow ends up funny. It is, as a result of not being hack, if I could find a way to be clever about it, even though it's definitely punching down, okay, let's acknowledge that yet again. If I avoid the cliches and the obvious things, it is possible for that joke to be funny. And unfortunately, and I say this as someone who is involved in the comedy community, I might get in trouble for even saying this stuff. But one thing that I want to acknowledge is that if you've ever attended an open mic, it is insane how many hack comedians will show up at an open mic and use hack jokes with obvious premises, and they'll try to be edgy and make these jokes about controversial topics to get a rise out of people, just to cover for the fact that they're not funny. Okay, Dave Chappelle is not an example of this. Okay. Dave Chappelle got me to laugh at a fucking rape joke. I never thought that this was possible. I never would have imagined in my wildest dreams that someone would get me to laugh at a rape joke. And Dave Chappelle pulled it off. Now, the reason I'm saying this is in the exploration, like if you want to find a joke about a topic that is not hack, that doesn't have an obvious premise, is it worth the exploration to get Sid Rock to laugh at a rape joke? I would argue no. However, I'm as close to a free speech absolutist as you will find. And especially for comedy, I think that although The problem with edgy humor is that the exploration can lead to a lot of needless pain. If someone in your audience like is personally affected by this, and the end result might not even be worth it. However, I still support your right to do it, okay? Before I move on the subject of hack comedy, if you ever have the presence of mind to realize that the joke that you just laughed at has an obvious premise that has been done a million times before, and yet you're still laughing, that might be a clue that you just don't like the subject of this of the joke. An example of this is Joe Biden. If you want to make fun of Joe Biden, ending a sentence with "you know the thing," that's hack. Another example is "come on, man." Although it's funny to say that word, but let's be honest. If you want to make fun of Joe Biden, aka Brandon, to end a sentence with "come on, man" is hack. And if you laugh at that, it's probably because you just don't like Biden. It might be. I can't read your mind. I also want to remind you of a verbal tool that you can use if you're ever in the presence of someone who's saying these jokes. If you're wondering whether or not the person is actually being a bigot versus just saying an edgy joke because they like that kind of humor, they have a dark sense of humor, you're not laughing anyway. So you might as well say, what's the joke? It's really that simple. Let's take black people. Let's say someone made a joke about black people being drug dealers or whatever, and you ask them, what's the joke? An example of something a non-bigot might say is that, I'm laughing at myself because so many racists make jokes about black people being drug dealers, for instance. If someone actually was a racist and made that joke, and you ask them what's the joke is, most racists are smart enough to not admit it in public, and the fact that they will dodge and weave and wiggle and squirm and not bite the bullet and say, well, it's a joke, it's a joke, that kind of thing, that might be the signs that that joke came from someone who's actually a bigot. Coming back to Dave Chappelle, the segment that he got in trouble for was when he was talking about J.K. Rowling and her cancellation, and the viral quote that is that gets knocked around the internet everywhere is "I'm on Team TERF," because J.K. Rowling gets called a TERF a lot. I would argue she probably is, but J.K. Rowling lore isn't fresh enough in my mind. Okay. This is a Dave Chappelle segment. One of the things that he clearly doesn't understand what a TERF is, because in the context of that segment, I don't think he meant that he is excluding trans people. I think he was confusing sex and gender, and the fact that he called himself a TERF, I don't think that it's something that he would have went with had he understood that nuance. I don't think so. And again, I can't read his mind, but just to illustrate how poor his understandings of these issues is, another viral quote is when he said that gender is a fact. Is gender a fact? It depends. Are social constructs a fact? Is math a fact? Maybe, maybe not, depends on your point of view. But when he wanted to illustrate that point, he demonstrated how confused he is on this. These two fingers are representing sex and gender. He said, everyone in this room passed through the legs of a woman. All he had to do was say female, and he would have been good. Trans women are women, but trans women are male. I don't think anyone would argue with this. And reverse for trans dudes. The most hyper woke SJW with pronouns in their bio would not dispute that trans women have XY chromosomes. Their argument is that it doesn't matter, and that since gender is socially constructed, they're women. that's kind of the point of this. But in Dave's defense, I have seen hyperwoke SJWs with pronouns in their bio slip up and accidentally say transphobic things because they were confusing man woman with male female. So given our speech habits, it is very easy to slip up at just the right time where you accidentally say, you know, everyone was born from a woman, when the actual true statement is everyone is born from a female. And that's just an illustration of how poor Chappelle's education on these issues is, which explains why he needlessly gets into trouble. Again, if you want to say gender is a fact, I think what he meant to say is that biological sex is a fact, and that everyone in this room passed through the legs of a female. All he had to do was say that, and people probably would have been mad at him anyway. But before I wrap this up, I just want to acknowledge something. I haven't seen a lot of people mention this. When he was wrapping up that part of his show, I won't talk much about his trans friend. I don't think I can add much to that conversation. But when he was wrapping up his trans segment in the show, one thing that he said was that that's it for me. I won't make jokes about you guys anymore until I can be sure that we're all laughing together. This is an explicit olive branch that he is offering the LGBT community. Now, in context, this could probably seem very hollow if he's offering this olive branch after, you know, talking shit and saying a bunch of turfy transphobic shit for 15 minutes. But he did say that. That was one of the things that he wrapped up the segment with before going back to his trans friend who unfortunately committed suicide. If you want to detect what's in someone's heart, which you can't, the two best ways that you can go about it is to go with consistent patterns of behavior or watching for red flags. I haven't said this in a long time, but I've said this several times in the history of this channel. I would say that up to this point, Chappelle has had a consistent pattern of behavior of making edgy jokes. And would these jokes cause harm? I would rather, I'd rather err on the side of freedom to say these things. I can understand how, speaking of consistent patterns of behavior, I can see how someone who actually is a bigot and who really does hate trans people and who really does think that trans women are mentally ill men would be entertained by this, but for the wrong reasons. And the other thing to look out for, and I'm stepping away from Dave Chappelle for a bit, it's that, let's come back to my my hypothetical handicapped joke. Speaking of consistent patterns of behavior, if I consistently use edgy humor, that's one thing. But let's say that 50% of all the jokes that I say are about handicapped people. That might be a clue that maybe I do have some kind of prejudice against them, you know? Yeah, I can think of people that I've met in the comedy community who would consistently make jokes about a group of people. I'd rather not elaborate, but it was wild to me. I can't remember ever seeing this person have an opportunity to make fun of this group of people and not do it. And it was to the point where that person's humor was predictable to me and I wouldn't laugh, not because I'm offended, but because it's hack at this point. If I can see the joke coming a mile away, it's hack. And if the reason I can see this joke coming a mile away is because you always make jokes about handicapped people, then that might speak to what's in your heart. You know, I can't know for sure, but as far as whether or not Dave is a transphobe, I would argue based on the evidence, no. He's just ill-educated on these issues, and I hope he keeps up on his promise to not talk about these things until he can be sure that we're all laughing together. I really hope he does, but time will tell. This is going to be, as he said, his last special for a while, and we'll see what happens. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, you will enjoy this one here, so click on the card right here to watch it. Thank you so much. I will see you soon.